Far out in the uncharted backwaters of the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy lies a small, unregarded yellow sun. Orbiting this at a distance of roughly 92 million miles is an utterly insignificant little blue-green planet whose ape-descended life forms are so amazingly primitive that two of them think doing a podcast called Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea is a pretty neat idea. They are Jeff and Bryan. Hi there, this is Jeff. I'm with my friend Bryan, and this is our Independence Day bonus episode.
Hey Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing great, Bryan. How are you?
Well, I'm feeling like I'm stuck in a little bit of a sticky wicket.
A sticky wicket?
Yes.
Yikes. Those bales just don't want to fall, do they?
No, they don't. They don't want to.
All right. Well, this is our Life, the Universe, and Everything question and answer bonus podcast. So, do you want to jump right into it?
Sure, let's get going.
Well, that's great, Bryan, but I want to talk about something else first.
Of course, no problem.
Yeah.
Hey, that's what we're here for, isn't it?
Right. During our last episode, we had a lot of conversations about some of the edits that were made with him using the F word in the audio we listened to, and your edition of the book using Belgium. And I've got copies that have the F word, and I've got copies that have Belgium, and I have copies that have the reference to an author in a ringing telephone, and editions that don't. And none of that really hit home until I thought about it for a little while, and I was looking up what editions had what. Because we have listened to the radio series, we know what Belgium is.
Right.
Life, the Universe, and Everything in the United States editions, I believe, is the only place that Belgium is explained.
Right.
It's not in the first two books.
Okay.
And in the UK editions, which I believe use the F word that we heard in the audio, edit out the Belgium and the explanation of Belgium. So if they didn't listen to the radio series, they miss out on everything that Belgium is.
Okay. Yeah, because I know that you're right.
So I just find it odd that he has this whole piece that's just gone, and it's only in audio in the UK unless they've gotten a different edition book where they've added it.
Right. The only thing I wondered about also is, I mean, he does explain the concept of Belgium when he describes it in the Life, the Universe, and Everything book, so that we have an understanding of what he's referencing. So it's not like it's just out of the blue and sticks it in there and expects us to know it from the radio show. But I also wondered, because like I said, I was...
Where is it?
Where
is it other than there?
Where is the Belgian discussion?
Yes.
Oh, it's only in Life, Universe, and Everything that they discuss it, in the book.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. But it's not in the book where he uses the F word.
Right.
Because it's during the conversation at the party that Arthur doesn't understand how they know what Belgium is, and the person he's talking to keeps getting offended that he keeps saying Belgium.
Right.
And then the book breaks in and explains why there's this miscommunication.
Right.
When he used the F word, Arthur doesn't have that conversation with the woman because Belgium wasn't used.
Right.
So that's what I mean. It's the whole Belgium part isn't explained in the book that uses the F word or in the audio that we heard. When you listen to Life, the Universe, and Everything on audio read by Douglas Adams, there was no Belgium reference.
That's correct.
Yes. That's all I wanted to point out is that it's only in Life, the Universe, and Everything where it's not the F word. And if it's a UK edition that has the F word, the UK totally had that cut out. But again, there are so many different editions with so many little changes that I don't know how prevalent or unprevalent having that Belgium passage put in or taken out really is.
Yeah, that's a really good question. The only thing I wondered about was, like I said, I was reading from the book, and it was a first edition, probably U.S. edition, like you said,
Right.
from 1984. So it's got to be close to the source material from the original book. And I wondered whether everything else that we were using as reference came after that. And Adams and the group made some editorial changes beyond the original. But who knows? Like you said, we don't know whether this is which came first, the chicken or the egg.
Correct. Now we're going to jump into our questions.
Questionable answer 1.
Why has Arthur chosen to live a solitary life on prehistoric Earth rather than partnering up with one of the Gulgafrinchans, useless bloody loonies or not?
Well, I sort of alluded to it in the podcast, and I think I'm going to stick to my original idea here.
Okay.
I don't imagine that it was Arthur making that choice. In my opinion, it was the Gulgafrinchans making that choice for Arthur.
Yes, I would agree. Yeah.
I mean, I imagine that they left him out there all by himself because he kept chatting around about things that seemed impossible or ridiculous to them.
True.
So they basically just ostracized him from the community and left him alone.
Right. That makes perfect sense.
Questionable answer 2.
Why did Ford's Subetha Sensomatic not pick up Wowbagger's ship 2 years before the Chesterfield sofa appeared when he came to insult Arthur?
That's a good question, but I think we've answered this one before. Apparently, based on what we're being told by Ford and others, you have to be looking at the Sensomatic when it is detecting the ship or when you want it to be detecting a ship.
So it's not set on anytime there's a signal, turn on. You have to actually check it.
Yeah, and the reason that we know that that's true is because Ford also did not realize when Zaphod came to Earth.
Correct.
And went to the party. So if he had truly been looking at his Sensomatic, he probably would have seen the intrusion of Wobanger. But as we know from the story, I believe at that time he thought he was a lemon and he was jumping in and out of a lake because
Correct.
he thought the lake thought it was a gin and tonic.
Correct. He also could have been too far away. He could have known. He just couldn't get to where Arthur was by the time that he landed.
Yeah, that's a very good possibility as well. Mm-hmm.
And then just didn't mention it because that's when he went crazy and found the lake that thought it was a gin and tonic.
That's right.
Questionable answer 3.
Wowbagger is upset because he has seen every movie 30,000 times. He is immortal, so yes, he can watch a lot of movies a lot of times. But this suffers the same problem his goal of insulting people has, is new movies are being released all the time. So the only way it is possible for him to have seen every movie so many times is if they stopped making movies. So what do you think caused the collapse of the movie industry in the universe?
Oh, it's a great question. And I thought about this a little bit. First off, I want to say, in order to understand the two things that kind of frame this question, okay?
Okay.
One is that first thing he does is he asks the computer what networks they'll be passing through.
Okay.
And he's told that it's Cosmovid, ThinkPix, and Home Brain Box.
Right.
Okay. Then he asks the computer, are there any movies that I have not seen 30,000 times? And the computer says no. But presumably, if he had a new movie to view, he would have been told, yes, there are new movies to be seen.
Right.
And here they are. Here's the list.
Correct.
Okay. And the other thing that you kind of have to realize, at least when you look at the whole perspective of Wowbanger's life, the insult part of his life takes, 3-4 minutes?
Right.
And then he's got a 2 or 3 week travel time to the next destination.
Right.
Okay. So if you remember correctly, and trust me, I remember this like it was yesterday, when these movie streaming services that we understand them today, they weren't streaming services back then, but when these networks first got on the air, they had a limited amount of content.
Yes.
And if you wanted to watch something, you could have watched it 45 times in a week because they showed the same thing over and over and over and over again.
Correct.
And this book was written in 1982.
Right.
So there was no idea of a new movie coming out on these streaming services or these new, because they weren't even making their own content at that time. They were just releasing what was already out there and showing it over and over and over and over again. So this is one of those jokes, if you will, that has to have the context of time in order for it to be consistent with the reality. So the answer to your question is nothing destroyed the movie industry of the universe. It's just that this was at the beginning of those network connections.
Okay.
Because, of course, nowadays we have all kinds of new content. Every week we have new content. So it would be a different story if he were to write that same joke today.
Correct.
Questionable answer 4.
In the same vein as you cannot uncrack an egg or unring a bell, how were the ashes reconstituted into the wooden stump to be used in the key?
Another very good question. Are you familiar with the law of conservation of mass?
Yes.
Okay, well, that says that matter can change form through physical and chemical changes, but through any of these changes, matter is conserved. The same amount of matter exists before and after the change, so none is created or destroyed.
Okay.
So despite the fact that the pillar, in fact, had been burned from its wooden original stump into ashes, all of the elements that created that pillar still existed in the universe, and therefore, with the right kind of technology, could be reconstituted into the pillar or post.
Okay. Special technology.
Special technology. They've got lots of it then.
Yes.
And remember who's doing the motivating here.
Just no new movies.
No movies.
Lots of technology, but no movies.
Oh, well, he would have been told if there were new movies. Yeah. Well, and remember, if you think about it also, Hactar is the one that's pushing this group of robots around to get this device. And Hactar exists
right
primarily at this point on a subatomic level. So he, of any consciousness, if you will, that exists, would be the one who would be able to do it.
Okay.
So that's where that goes for me.
Questionable answer 5.
Ford said, "Then we don't stand a whelk's chance in a supernova." Arthur asked, "What's a whelk got to do with a supernova?" And so do I.
All right, so you're probably going to kick me.
Okay.
But I got to tell you, this is beautiful, okay?
All right.
For our American audience, I think it's important that we establish what a whelk is, okay?
All right.
And I'm assuming that you're familiar with it already, right?
Yes.
Okay, so a whelk is a sea snail, and it's the kind of sea snail with a spiral shell, beautiful spiral shell. And when they're cooked, they're tender and succulent. And in Europe, they're commonly served at seaside stands in Britain. So it's a very common thing. So basically, it is a snail.
Right.
Okay. And on top of that, are you familiar with the Fibonacci series?
Yes.
Or sequence?
Yes.
So you know that when
it's the spiral of the shell.
Right. So the spiral of the shell is called the golden spiral.
Right.
And it exists within nature, what's in a seemingly miraculous connection between math and the real world.
Right.
And that golden spiral also exists within our galaxy, because the galaxy spins in a spiral and those kind of things. The whelk, in its perfection, shows a perfect example of the complexity of the universe. And of course, we know that nothing can survive a supernova.
Correct.
So to me, it's a perfect piece of connection between the infinity of the universe and the connectedness of all things. So for me, a whelk is a great example of what he could have chosen for what life would exist beyond a supernova.
Okay. Okay.
Questionable answer 6.
Agrajag was extremely angry at Arthur in the Cathedral of Hate. He told the story of how he decided not to come back and just stay in the netherworld. He said he was yanked involuntarily back as a bowl of petunias for a very brief time. So how was his reaction only a resigned, "Oh no, not again," and not a full-blown temper tantrum? And I have a follow-up question that I did not prepare you for because I just thought of it.
Oh, I just have to laugh. I laughed and laughed at this question.
Well, here's my follow-up question that you can ponder why you're giving me this answer.
Okay, I bet it's my first answer to my question.
How long did it take the petunias to actually die on the surface of Magrathea?
Oh, there you go. That's a good question.
Yeah, see?
Okay, so here's my thoughts, all right? They're twofold, basically, all right? And I'll answer your third question as well. 1, what would it look like for a bowl of petunias to throw a tantrum?
I don't know.
Okay, so that's my first answer.
But its exclamation would not have been, "Oh no, not again." It would have been,
"Ah!" Well, maybe, but again, you have to assume a lot of what is the nature of consciousness.
True.
And to what extent is a bowl of petunias conscious?
I guess petunias are very, very happy flowers, and "Oh no, not again" is about as mean as they get.
If you're going to anthropomorphize them, I believe that is about true.
Okay.
But to your question, to the root of the question, I'm going to say something else. Based on the fact that this "Oh no, not again" is in the radio show and in the book, original book. Okay?
Right.
And during the radio show, he never even came close to giving us an answer as to why this "Oh no, not again." He in fact said if we understood that, we'd understand a lot more about the universe.
Correct.
So I say that because he didn't choose to resolve it in the radio show, it wasn't until he got to this point in the book that he thought, "Oh, this is a cute way of resolving this little conundrum. I'm going to use that statement." So again, you can't put the chicken before the egg, right? You can't put the egg before the chicken, in whichever case it is, because he would have had to assume he understood what he meant when he wrote it the first time and where he planned to go the second time. And I don't think he did.
No, there's no way. There's no way when he wrote that joke the first time that he had planned out a being that was killed over and over by the same person. I just think he thought it was funny.
Yeah, exactly. So, that was one of our answers we were using on the last podcast about the book.
Right.
He thought it was funny. But in this particular case, I believe that he not only steals that part of the story, the other thing that he steals from the radio show is the statue.
Yes, absolutely.
So he was in love with the concept of the statue. And of course, I love the way the statue is portrayed in this particular part of the book, with all its hideousness and grotesqueness.
Yes.
Which
yes, he actually improved on it.
Oh, yeah. So there's an improved concept. So it's been said of Adams that he never wanted to let a good concept go to waste. And I think that was one of his ideas here. He didn't want either of these things to go to waste.
Well, we're certainly seeing that. We are certainly seeing that in going through all of this material, how stuff that has fallen out has gotten worked back in. Just like we talked about at the last episode about the book.
Yep.
Slarty Bart Fast using the line from Sheila's ear.
Yep.
He wasn't going to let that go to waste. He was going to find a way to work it in.
Yep, you got it. That's awesome.
All right.
Questionable answer 7.
Arthur confronted Thor at the party and did the old, "Do you want to step outside?" joke, and then left when he went outside. He was called a coward. Would you call that being a coward?
Another good question. You know what? No, I don't think I would call it being a coward.
Certainly not.
And in fact, some of the motivation,
However,
However,
I'm going to put this in here, and well, I'm going to let you finish because I'm sure you're going to go there, and I don't want to. You're supposed to answer. So
I'm sorry.
Start again. And
if my answer isn't yours. Okay, so actually, I believe he was rather brave to stand and confront Thor. I mean, obviously Thor is an imposing figure.
Correct.
And if you've ever been in a situation like that, I mean, your teeth would be chattering, your toes would be twinkling, you'd want to get the hell out of there.
Right.
So I kind of agree with his assessment, Arthur's assessment, that it was a rather clever way of getting out of the situation.
Yes, it was. Oh, and you didn't bring it up, so I am going to mention it.
Good.
He knew he couldn't die because he hasn't been to that planet yet.
Yeah, that's true. Now I wonder if he's absorbed that concept yet. I don't know. But
it should absorb him forever until he gets to Stavromulan Beta.
Yep, absolutely. That's a good point. Good point.
Thank you.
Questionable answer 8.
So the book says 5 years had elapsed locally since cricket was sealed in its slow time envelope. And the slow time envelope was created 10 billion years ago. This was a warring race holding a grudge. They want to kill everything. Yes, they're in a slow time envelope. But 5 years have passed locally. It would take less time than that for the warships to have gone the distance necessary to pass through the envelope. They should have been wreaking havoc across the galaxy a long time ago. So what other measures must have been in place to keep them from leaving?
Okay, an excellent question, but I think it's answered actually in the book. When we're looking at this part of the book, it's the Wicket Gate is what locks the planet away, okay?
Yes.
And the Wicket Gate was locking the planet of Cricket from the outside of the dust cloud that surrounded it. The dust cloud would have been surrounding their whole solar system like the Oort cloud surrounds ours, with the sun in the middle and the planet of Cricket orbiting around the sun. Okay?
Okay.
And it's described in the book by the judge that all light would be deflected around the envelope so that it would remain invisible and impenetrable. Escape from the envelope would be utterly impossible unless it was unlocked from outside.
Right. So the envelope actually kept them in, but we don't know exactly how.
Right, because it's some kind of a light-related thing that basically whatever they've created would not let light penetrate it, therefore nothing else could penetrate it. And of course, we know that the Cricket robot's spaceship lands on the asteroid, they assemble the key, and then they descend through the cloud on the asteroid to the planet below.
Okay, right.
Questionable answer 9.
I can buy that a model of a glider will help you to be able to build a glider. However, a non-working model of an engine or a star drive would not be likely to help, especially to build one in a year. So how did they do it?
Okay, and again, this is sort of answered in the book, and the way that this is answered is that the ship's a fiction that's created by Haktar, specifically designed to provide Cricket with the information that's needed in order for them to design and build their own spaceship. It says in the book, it was as if it were a full-scale model of one.
Yes.
A solid blueprint. In other words, it was a very useful thing to have around if you suddenly decided to build a spaceship. So it's more like working blueprints than it was a ship, in fact.
Okay. Wasn't it smoking wreckage, though?
Yeah, except that, again, that would be an artifice, designed to make it look like it came from the outside.
Right.
Questionable answer 10.
The whole group is on Slarty Bartfast's ship, the Beastromath, orbiting Cricket.
Mm-hmm.
All of them go to the planet's surface, except Zaphod, who goes to the Heart of Gold, which is said to be more millions of miles away than the mind can comfortably encompass. How did he get there?
You're right to ask this question. It isn't clear in the book, but the answer is the answer is very, very simple. Slarty Bartfast took him back to his ship before they went down to the planet.
Well, that's what he would have had to do, but boy, that is a fast ship. I mean,
Yes.
They talk about it being fast, but man, that's
Exactly.
a fast
So
ship.
as improbable as that little trip is, apparently that is what happens.
Questionable answer 11.
So I'm hoping that you can straighten this out in my mind, because I read it and reread it and tried to figure it out and do all the logistics, and I couldn't figure it out. Zaphod used the infinite improbability drive and ends up in the cricket war zone. He parks and is said to enter the most important building and meets Marvin. Trillian asks to be taken to their leader. That group goes, I'm guessing, the same building where Zaphod is, because he's like watching through some things. He's keeping an eye on that. After Trillian's confrontation of the Cricket War elders, it seems darkness encompasses her and Arthur. As they start talking with Haktar, it says, they glanced at each other and then stepped out, improbably, along the shaft of light which streamed out of the open hatchway of the Heart of Gold into the dim granular darkness of the dust cloud. Did he forget where they were? They're supposed to be in that main building, not on the Heart of Gold. So if it's not that building, how did they get on the Heart of Gold?
Oh, of course. This is one of those, it's far simpler than you're making it, and that's probably why it's difficult. Okay? Because you did read the passage, and it's right there in the passage, though you have to read it in such a way that it makes sense, okay? It doesn't say that they're on the Heart of Gold, okay? They are definitely talking with the elders. And then Haktar moves space around and moves things around and creates a bridge, okay, with light.
Mm-hmm.
So it does say in the book, stepped out improbably along the shaft of light that streamed out of the open hatchway of the Heart of Gold. Well, presumably, when Zaphod got there, he opened up the hatchway in order to get onto the other spaceship building. He would have left it open, and Haktar would have known that.
Right.
And so what happens is, and in the reading, I can understand the confusion. They are not on the end in the Heart of Gold. They are on the other end of the bridge in the building.
The light is streaming out of the Heart of Gold to the building door that they're stepping out of.
Or actually right into the building, whatever room there happened to be in. Right. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So it is a difficult way of saying that in the sentence. They could have made it more understandable, but from the perspective that we look at it, it's literally comes out of the Heart of Gold and up to the building where they are. They get on the bridge and walk towards the Heart of Gold because it's close to the building.
Correct. They're not stepping out of the Heart of Gold. They're stepping onto the shaft of light that's coming out of the Heart of Gold.
Correct. All
right. Good. I'm glad you cleared that up.
Yeah, where the author could have done a lot better job of making that clearer. It's not clear.
Yes.
It's not clear.
Questionable answer 12.
Haktar was pulverized by the Silastic armor fiends of Striderex. He now encases the planet of Cricket. Is that the same planet the Silastic armor fiends of Striderex inhabit? If not, how did he get to the planet of Cricket? And another follow-up question you're not prepared for. You had already mentioned it. Yeah, you had already mentioned it earlier. The dust cloud encompasses and encases a solar system, a sun, and its planet. Mm-hmm. How big was Haktar that spread out? It encompassed a sun and an orbiting planet. So how big was Haktar?
Excellent question. And because this question ties in with the last one, I'm going to try and answer this one in a briefer way.
Okay.
So, no, it's not the planet of the Silastic armor fiends, and it clearly says that it's not in the book.
Okay.
And Haktar had to search around the galaxy to find this planet with the inhabitants that became Cricket.
Right.
And the way that he accomplished that, of course, was he floated on cosmic winds.
Right.
And to the answer your other question was, it almost doesn't matter how big Haktar is, because he would have used the dust and detritus that he picked up along the way in order to create the envelope that surrounded the solar system of Cricket. So all of those little pieces of dust, etc., are not Haktar himself, but he's drawn them in with the powers that he has.
Oh, I got the feeling they were.
It feels like
Yeah,
it.
because I almost think that it was talking about how it felt that every molecule seemed to be sentient.
Right.
So that's why I got the feeling that it wasn't debris with him. It was all him. And I couldn't believe that he could have been that big, that he could encompass a solar system.
Yeah, it would be unimaginable that he would have been physically that large. But maybe as he incorporated all these dust particles into his body, he became larger. And like you say, he became the dust cloud, or the dust cloud became him.
Right. Well, there's lots of science fiction out there where there are space stations or things built that are the size of a planet. And I always wonder, where did they get the material?
Yeah, from 5 other planets that they destroyed.
Yeah, they destroyed 5 other planets. At least. Because that's not all usable material.
Exactly. But we're back to that first question, about the Wicket Gate or the Wicket Post. How did they assemble all of that into usable material?
Yeah.
Questionable answer 13.
For the big question about the whole premise of the book, we can make this a discussion if you like. That question is, would the solitary people of Cricket really have reacted that way to discovering there was a whole universe out there?
Yes, what a great question. And I agree. This is, well, we'll call it an improbability, of course.
Yes.
But the answer really is there. It's all in the book. It clearly says that Haktar created this illusion for this race. He surrounded their solar system and did not allow them to see beyond their solar system out into the stars. And it says that Haktar says when he's talking with Arthur and Trillian, I deliberately nurtured the planet of Cricket till they would arrive at the same state of mind as the Silastic armor fiends, and require of me the design of the bomb that I failed to make the first time. I wrapped myself around the planet and coddled it. Under the influence of events I was able to engineer and influences that I was able to generate, they learned to hate like maniacs.
What did they hate?
It took him thousands of years to accomplish his goal.
But Cricket was serene. There was no hate on Cricket.
Not that we understand.
I know it says that in the book.
Yes.
I'm not disputing, but what I'm saying is there was no hate. It's also said that there was no concept of anything else. They didn't have this hatred built up because there wasn't anything else to hate. They just all lived these idyllic, peaceful lives. And what they ended up doing was they continued to live these idyllic, peaceful lives, but they sent out the army of robots. They weren't going out there killing people. That's all the robots they built. And then they had the robots build robots.
Right.
So they didn't... I know that's what he said, but I'm saying there's a disconnect between his explanation and what we are told life was like on Cricket.
You're right, but...
That's where Arthur goes back.
Right. So there is an explanation of that as well, because Haktar says that he has less influence on the ground than he does in space. So he had to get them to go out into space. So when he creates the blueprint spaceship, it lands on their planet, and then they spend the next year creating a new spaceship that they could leave their planet from. Now remember, they're leaving their planet, and now they're within the orbit of Haktar, so that his influence on their state of mind is magnified.
Oh, so he
greatly.
Can... Okay.
So by the time those pilots left the dust cloud, they were totally absorbing Haktar's hatred for the universe.
I see.
And they were totally immersed within his goal of what he wanted to see happen. And he says that he has much more influence in the sky, and that's why he had to get them into the sky so that he could control their lives and create an environment where they would hate. And It's once they leave the planet themselves. And they even talk about that in the book. When they land on the planet, the four of them, or, the five of them, I can't count, talk about how they run into these people, and the guy's like, hey, it might be fun to have sports events.
Right,
with
exactly.
People in the universe. But again, there's a difference.
So that's why all the buildings are up in the dust cloud.
Yes, exactly. So the folks in the dust cloud, the ones in the ships that have been created to destroy the universe, those folks are influenced by Haktar much more than the ones on the planet itself.
And they live in it.
So all of that hatred is Haktar's. You're right. It's not the people of Cricket who are
sense.
Hateful. It's Haktar.
So what I can say is then I have so you've answered the objection that I had about his explanation of how all of that. But he talked about coddling and nurturing, but he didn't. Because on the planet, it's only when they're in his cloud, literally, that he can inject all of his hatred. So there was no coddling and nurturing. He just made them go up into his cloud, and that's when he forced it on them.
Well, he says he has less influence on the ground, not no influence on the ground.
Right.
You're right. It wasn't until he got them into space that he was able to actually create them as these hateful, universe-destroying beings.
Right.
Interesting, though. I mean, what a great question, and so much of it is left to the interpretation. I would be surprised if other people didn't feel the same way that you did.
Well, I'm hoping that other people did, and other people hear this, and other people enjoy us talking about all these things that we wanted clarified.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree with you. They don't appear by their nature to be evil people.
No.
It's by their nurture that they become evil.
Right.
And Haktar is their nurturer. So.
All right, Bryan. Well, thank you again for answering all of the questions I had. Looking forward to the next book and throwing out more questions for you when we get to So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. But before we get there, there's going to be a bunch of different episodes. I think we're going to get to reread this book again when it's called Doctor Who and the Cricket Men, but we'll find that out in our next episode.
Sounds like an awesome time, Jeff, and I guess it's time to say goodbye. So, Jeff, why don't you say goodbye?
I will say goodbye to the universe, because it has to go.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea. Look for us the first Thursday of every month for a full episode. We will also release a bonus episode later in the month. A very special thanks goes out to Luke, Max, Greg, and Tim Lesnick for arranging and performing our opening theme. We would also like to thank our talented friends and family for their voice work on our introductions and commercials. A very special thank you goes out this episode to Kelly Lesnick for counting up our questions. Visit our website at digitalwatchesareaprettynneatidea.buzzsprout.com, where you can find links to all my Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy inspired t-shirt designs. You can find us on Facebook and YouTube as Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea, on Instagram as Watches Idea Podcast, and on Twitter at Watches Idea. If you'd like to contact us, our email is digitalwatchespodcast@gmail.com.
This has been a Froods for Thought production.